Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, Juneteenth, and on Juneteenth, Tegna says there is no UCSS. It is a company-wide holiday, but we at UCSS still want to give you guys some new, fresh content. So Jason Lloyd and myself are going to break down some of the Cavs' most pressing topics. I have a new team-building theory that I'm fascinated to see what Jason believes and how it impacts Cleveland. We have to discuss some of the Evan Mobley discourse that has gone on this week throughout the show, and then we have some wild overreactions to get to. But full disclosure, we are taping this earlier in the week. We are not technically live right now, even though you are seeing it live. But Jason, let's do a little predictive measure. How's your Thursday going, buddy?
Since I'm not working, I think it will be going lovely and wonderful, getting some yard work done, maybe even write a little bit. Hopefully the weather cooperates. How about you?
We got the Njoku softball game tonight, so we'll be still working in some capacity. We're hoping to get some one-on-one interviews with Njoku, Shador, all the Browns guys that are out there, Miles, some celebrities who are not Browns related are expected to be in attendance. So that should be fun, but let's dive into the reason we are here. By the way, we're back full capacity tomorrow. We have a full UCSS on Friday. It'll be Bull, it'll be J, it'll be G. 90 minutes on YouTube, 30 minutes on WKYC. Download the WKYC app and the WKYC Plus app if you can't watch it in Cleveland area. You can still watch it on your phone or wherever. But Jason, let's dive into the meat and potatoes. We're going to give these people a show, whether they want it or not, on a Thursday morning. I have a bit of a theory when it comes to the future of the NBA and how teams are going to start building their teams out in a position to put themselves to win a championship, to best position themselves to win a championship. And it's a little bit of a different theory than we've seen in the past. I had this idea kind of throughout the regular season, but didn't have enough evidence. I still don't know if I have enough evidence, but I think my idea has come even more prevalent in the playoffs here. And that is with the second apron looming and all the financial restrictions and confusion that it causes. It's essentially a hard cap in certain areas, depending on which maneuvers you pull. I think the future of the NBA is less and less, let's acquire 2 or 3 megastars, pay 2 or 3 guys a ton of money and fill out the roster with 6, 7, 8, 9 guys that can take up 30% of the cap in total, and more of a team building philosophy of who's our weakest link and how do we make our weakest link stronger. Depth is more important than it ever has been in the past, but not just depth in the traditional sense, Jason. You have to have flexible depth. And I'll give you no better example than both the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Indiana Pacers in the NBA Finals. Isaiah Hartenstein had been the biggest free agent acquisition the Thunder had signed in about a decade. $30 million per year this season, Jason. A little bit of a declining contract in the next 2 seasons, but he was a massive free agent signing, and he was crucial in their first 3 playoff series against Minnesota, against Denver, against the Grizzlies, who, frankly, they could have beat with one hand tied behind their back. However, against Indiana, Jason, he's been their weak link, and he's been played off the floor. And at times, the Thunder have closed with no bigs. At times, they've closed with one big, and that one big being Chet Holmgren. And when Isaiah Hartenstein's been on the court, the Pacers have attacked him relentlessly. Let's flip to the other side of the court. The Pacers. How big was Miles Turner in their playoff run to get to the finals? The way he dominated New York in certain stretches, the way he dominated the Cavs bigs in the second round, the way he single-handedly controlled the paint against Giannis and the Bucks. Do you realize that the Pacers have closed 3 of these 4 games with Obi Toppin at the 5 and Miles Turner on the bench, Jason? That is the flexibility that depth creates to eliminate your weak link. In the playoffs, it's all about mismatch hunting, finding the weak link and attacking that weak link. And it's not always going to be the same weak link, depending on the situation and the circumstance. But I think the way teams are going to go about building their teams out now in an ideal world, and once again, this is easier said than done, is how can we be flexible to feel pretty good about our proverbial weak link against 2 or 3 different kind of teams, Jason? It's less about having a big 3 per se and a bunch of fill-ins a la Mike Miller, Shane Battier, Mario Chalmers, Udonis Haslem, like the Heatles in the early 2010s, and more like a team in the mold of OKC with a bunch of variable pieces that you can mix and match to best counter your opponent. What say you?
I don't think we have enough data. I hear you. I don't know that I agree with that yet. Teams have been exploiting mismatches and forcing guys off the floor for years. And so it sounds like depth over top end talent is what you're saying. Am I understanding that correctly?
You still need stars. Like the Thunder aren't here without SGA and Jalen Williams playing awesome. The
Right.
Pacers aren't in the finals without Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam being incredible. But to win a championship, I think you need the requisite depth to be flexible enough. And that was one of the Cavs' issues this year. When they missed guys, they weren't flexible enough to change their style of play to adapt to the personnel you actually have available.
I think it still will always be you want your best guys on the floor. I still think it's going to always be play 7, trust 6, play 8, trust 7 type stuff. I think even this finals, I think, would bear that out in terms of minute production, even though these are two fairly deep teams. I still think they're playing their top end guys the most. I don't know that we have – I just think that it's such a new world that we just don't know yet what's going to work and what's not. When I look at the Pacers being a team that if they were to win a championship would do it on the lowest number of regular season wins in 30 years tells me this is more of an anomaly than the way it's going to be in the future. But maybe that's not true. Maybe it is the way that it is going to be moving forward. But, when you look at the number, I was thinking about this today, the stat that you came up with, and then I confirmed it on StatHead about the number of wins and point margin, right? What was the exact stat?
64 wins, 9 points per win margin.
I mean,
12 of 14 had won the championship.
That to me is telling. And I know that we've used that as an indictment against the Cavs, but I also actually think that it validates the Cavs as they were a damn good team that had a really lousy couple of weeks. And we can get to that in a minute. So I still think it's always going to be star driven. And I hear you, like you're not disputing that, but you're only as good as your weakest link. I'm trying to think like 2016 Cavs, because obviously that team won a championship and I was there for every single one of those games. And I know this is a different world and a different NBA, but like what was the weakest link on that team? They didn't have one.
Was it the Shumpert, J.R. Smith?
Shump. I mean, it was probably Shump, but Shump wasn't even a starter. JR hit some massive threes in Game 7. He hit 2 huge threes in Game 7 that really sort of allowed the Cavs to hold on to the rope when it felt like it might be getting away from them. Kevin Love, honestly, at times was the weak link. They forced him to the bench, and he had the concussion, and he went to the bench, and they brought him off the bench because he just couldn't guard Draymond. So I think my counter would be what does the weakest link provide, and does it still help you? When we talk about Isaac Okoro, obviously we talk about you can scheme him off the floor, and you can. And teams, frankly, I think could scheme Jared Allen off the floor. But those guys who get schemed off the floor, there's also pockets and moments where they can help you. So I don't know. It's a really interesting concept that I just think we're too new into this. I think if you asked around the league, I think a lot of teams would maybe shrug and say, I don't know, come back in 3 years, 5 years when we have more data in this, and then we'll have a better answer. But I don't think going 10 deep helps you win a championship. I don't think it does, because you're not going to go that deep in a finals. And I was looking for box scores off this series just to confirm that. If you look at total minutes played, and again, we're only through 5 games here. The Thunder have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys at 99 minutes or up. So let's call it 100 minutes. And then it's a pretty steep drop to Aaron Wiggins at 70 minutes. And the Pacers have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys at 90 minutes and up. And then it's a pretty steep drop after that. And they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at 100 and up. So even for the depth that we've applauded both of these teams to have, they're still not going all that deep into their bench because it's still all about, at this point in the season, early in the playoffs, earlier in the rounds, you go deeper. When you get to this point, you want your best guys on the floor.
All that is true. But both of these teams, Indiana and Oklahoma City, despite the fact they're playing 7 and 8 guys for the majority, these are not the 7 and 8 guys that necessarily got them to be in this position. Like I mentioned before, Miles Turner isn't closing games right now for Indiana.
Yeah.
Miles Turner closed every game against the Knicks, every game against the Cavs, and every game against the Bucks. They're now closing with Obi Toppin at the 5. And they have decided that the trade-off, and in this case, Miles Turner, who's not the worst player on their team, but in this particular situation, he was their weak link defensively, and he's not making threes. So the disparity between what he brings offensively, and by the way, he's a terrible rebounder, so it's not like he's getting boards either. I think he has 12 rebounds in the last 4 games combined. He had 6 in game 5, which was more than he had 7 in the 3 games prior, so he's got 13. He's not making shots. He's a liability defensively. That's our weak link. We now have to have the flexibility to, okay, we can't just survive by continuing to play Miles Turner the same way we have throughout the playoffs. We got to make the switch. And here comes in Obi Toppin, who is not a better player than Miles Turner. Trust me, I'm not saying he's a better player than Miles Turner.
Yeah.
In this particular matchup, he's a better fit for what OKC wants to do on both ends of the court.
But I think that's been going on for years. And again, I'll go back to 2016. Channing Frye was phenomenal when they played Toronto. Channing couldn't get on the floor against Golden State. So I think that it's just, this is the way it's always been, where some guys are matchup dependent. And even, like I said, Kevin Love is part of the biggest big threes you can have. Ty brought him off the bench against the Warriors because he was just getting cooked by Draymond defensively. They just kept hunting him and putting him in pick and rolls, and they just what he was giving up defensively was more than what he was giving them offensively. So I just think that this is, I don't know that this is any different than what we've seen over the last 10, 15, 20 years. I just think it depends on who's the two teams and what do the matchups look like. And some guys are better matchups in some series than others. But, I think what will be fascinating to see is, as we get deeper into this and you talk parity, will deeper teams, will guys go deeper into their lineups, and will that have more an effect? Because I'm really, and I mentioned this to you the other day, I've just got this stuck in my head now about just get hot at the right time. Mm-hmm. The Cavs had an awful 2 weeks at the worst possible time. Injuries, performance, all of that. And the NBA playoffs are longer than any other sport. NHL, but I don't count NHL because we don't have a team here.
Almost 2 months long, if not exactly 2 months, yeah.
Baseball's a month. Football's a month. Football begins in January and the Super Bowl is early February. Baseball begins early October and ends end of October, early November, depending on how long the World Series goes. It's a month. So NFL, I think, is a little bit different because it's so quarterback dependent. I think we have to set that to the side. But baseball and basketball, I think teams are looking at this as just get in and hope to God that we are healthy and hot at the right time. And you saw that with the Pacers. I mean, that was an incredible heater that they were on. Rarely do you see a team play this well for 2 months straight.
Frankly.
Yeah. Rarely do you see a team play this well for 2 months straight. And I think, when you talk about the Orlando trade and Desmond Bane going to the Magic, that also strikes me as that type of move is, hey, why not us? If Indiana can do it, why can't we do it? Just be healthy, which the Magic were not this year. If we're healthy and we get hot at the right time, we can make a run at this thing. And I think that may be the more prevalent thought that teams have. I think a lot of MLB teams think that way, and it wouldn't shock me to see a lot of NBA teams start to adopt that, coming off the Celtics dismantling, coming off the parity that we've seen in the league, and coming off what the Pacers are doing now.
So the Bane trade, to me, and I think you look at it 2 different ways, but to me that kind of validates my weak link theory. When the Magic looked at their roster last season, said KCP's making a ton of money, not giving us a ton of production. By the way, I'm never trading for a player from Denver again, because what the player looks like with Nikola Jokic is very different than what that player has looked anywhere else in his career. And for all the Jared Allen for Rui Hachimura trades, by the way, Rui has been terrible in his career without LeBron. I'm just telling you, I don't like his perspective outside of playing with LeBron. There's a lot of guys that look good playing next to the greatest players in the world and look very different elsewhere. That's a whole tangent for another day. But
ask Milwaukee about Matthew Dellavedova with LeBron and without LeBron and the contract he got.
But with the Bane trade, they swapped out a weak link for a strong link here, right? Desmond Bane, a significant upgrade.
Yeah.
He's a great fit in Orlando. We could talk about that. But now Orlando, if they're healthy, and that's a gigantic, and I mean, Control A, change font to size 3000, gigantic if they can now close with a giant lineup of Suggs, Bane, Franz, Paolo, and Wendell Carter Jr. or Jonathan Isaac. They could put Anthony Black in there as a more traditional point guard, which still gives them size, and play Franz and Paolo at the 4 and the 5 and just a 5-out spread offensive attack. They have that versatility. So maybe the weak link theory isn't the right way to phrase it, Jason. It's we need to be able to mix and match to attack your weaknesses, which you're right to a sense has probably always been a case across the NBA. But now I think with some of the financial restrictions of having 3 or 4 highly paid players together, teams may opt for those 2 guys that you have to have, an SGA and a Jalen Williams, the 2 max guys, let's call them. And then instead of trying to find ways to pay a 3rd and a 4th guy in that $35 to $45 million range, that money would be better off spread across 5 or 6 guys that give you some more versatility. You still need stars to win. You will never win because your 5th best player was better than their 5th best player. That is not what I'm getting at. I just think when it comes to building your teams, you need those stars. But I also think now more than ever, you need the versatility to be able to play multiple styles of basketball. And by giving yourself different options to be your 5th link, your weak link, you can counter teams in ways you haven't in the past. And I go back to that Indiana series against the Cavs, Jason. When Evan was out, when DG was out, when DeAndre was out, they didn't change stylistically how they played whatsoever. Not even slightly. Now, they ran a different offense because Donovan was the only guy that could create. But from a stylistic standpoint, they tried to do the same things. And in game 2, it almost worked. Game 2, it almost worked. They should have won game 2. Yeah. We agree. There's no excuse for them losing that game 2 game against the Pacers and that horrific collapse in the final 48 seconds. But then they didn't really have a counterpunch to figure out how else can we play against Indiana style, right? Indiana dictated the tempo. They dictated the pace. They made Cleveland play Indiana Pacers basketball. Yeah. And the Cavs did not have the lineup versatility by not having any real backup bigs, by not having a secondary ball handler behind Darius Garland that they could trust when Ty Jerome wasn't there. And I understand it's hard to ask for 3 legitimate ball handlers, but you know what? I'm asking for 3. 3 guys should be able to break a press on a team. They had to play Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade, who give you absolutely nothing offensively. So they weren't able to adjust to the style of basketball it takes to beat Indiana. So maybe I'll call it the amoeba theory, Jason. Maybe it's not the weak link theory. It's you need to be able to have versatility to adapt and match with your opponent so you don't get taken out of your game if you can't be the dictator in terms of pace and style. But I do think that as we move deeper and deeper into the second apron era, will be more prevalent than ever before.
Well, and that I can totally get behind that of 2 stars and flexibility. And if I'm being totally honest, I thought the Cavs were flexible, and I thought they did have versatility. When they traded for DeAndre, that really allowed them. They can play big and long. They could play with shooters around Evan.
On paper, we were right.
But what happened, I think, and we can get to a little bit in this in a minute. Darius was hurt, and he tried, whatever you want. Obviously, he was hurt. And Ty, you were counting on Ty to be Ty, and for the first time all year, he wasn't. Mm-hmm. But up until that point, he had been. Like, everybody was singing the praises of Ty Jerome up until that series where he kind of got exposed a little bit. So
and he was incredible against Miami too, which is the funny part, because he was literally the best he had played all season.
Yeah,
was in that sweep of Miami.
So yes, I mean, it's inexcusable that you can't get the ball across midcourt as an NBA team in the last minute of game 2. And that's going to haunt them. It's the middle of June. That happened a month ago, and it's still haunting them. I promise you, they're still just have hangovers off of that game and stomach aches and headaches and everything else off of that game too. But this may sound lunacy, but I just think that we've swung so far the other way, and I know we'll talk about it in a minute. I just think we've swung so far the other way on the Cavs that I think it's lost touch with reality. This was a good team, and they were versatile and they were flexible. They just had the worst 2 weeks at the worst possible moment to have the worst 2 weeks. So, but back to your other point, I do think 2 is the way of the future in the NBA, and if you can find 2 homegrown guys where you don't have to trade for them and you have to upend your entire system to go get them, if you can have 2 really strong guys and then supplement those with other pieces, I do think that that's the way to go in the future. And that's why the Cavs right now are sort of swimming upstream as the anomaly. And I understand maybe some of the hesitation to break it up because they feel like they've got 4 really good pieces. Yep. And in the way that the NBA is headed, that's not allowable anymore. So you want to hold on to that for as long as you can because you feel like it creates some sort of advantage. Now we can have the debate, is that really, are they built the best that they can be? But just from a theory of the league is trying to disband high spending teams and the Cavs have 4 really good players that they feel good about, still puts them in a minority.
Fair. We're going to get to our next topic here, Jason, which is brought to us by FanDuel. Game 6 of the NBA Finals is tonight. The Thunder can close it out, or can Indiana force a Game 7? However you think the game will play out, you better be using FanDuel to make your bet. If you have a winning ticket, by the way, make sure you send it in to us. We want to feature it here on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. Right now, new customers on FanDuel can bet $5, and if that first $5 bet wins, they'll win $200 in bonus bets. Head over to FanDuel.com/UCSS to get in on the action. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Today's show is also brought to us by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. It's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track your accounts, investments, and spendings all in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for 50% off your first year. Okay, Jason, our second topic of today's Juneteenth show. Can Evan Mobley become the Cavaliers' best player? Can he become the offensive force you and I both believe he needs to for this team to take the next level if he's playing alongside 2 ball-dominant guards in Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland? I have some very strong thoughts on this, but I want to start with you first.
Yeah, he can become number 1. Now, I think it is a valid argument to make that having 2 ball dominant guards takes the oxygen away from Evan. I think that's a valid concern to have. I don't think I would not dismiss that at all. I guess my counter to that would be, if these guys are as good as you think they are, they can find a way to get him the ball and get him incorporated in the offense and give him opportunities to create just as well as them. It's a luxury to have 3 guys who can dribble, pass, and shoot. I think Evans has worked his way into that conversation as one of those guys who can dribble, pass, and shoot. So you want to take full advantage of it. I think it does more harm to your team to remove, and let's pretend that the toe surgery never happened, right? And they're going to trade Darius. I think it does more harm to your team to remove that, to give him room to flourish, when the real luxury is having 3 guys who can do it. So why would you cut off one leg to replace it with another, if that makes sense? I think the thing for Kenny Atkinson to do, I mean, nobody can deny, even the strongest Evan Mobley haters, nobody can deny he took a massive leap this year in the first year of Kenny's system. So now it becomes, okay, well, now how can we get the ball in his hands even more? How can we increase that usage rate? If that means, Darius, you have to take a step back, that's not a bad thing, I don't think. Donovan has already sort of acquiesced, and he could probably continue to do so a little bit more. I think you can continue to grow that role with Evan, but it's on those guys to do it. And I'll go back. I don't mean to keep talking about the 2014, 15, 16, 17 teams, but those were really good teams that figured out how to win at a high level. I remember when Ty came in, he basically told Kyrie, you go last. Like, Kevin eats first. You've got to feed him the ball. You've got to get Kevin the ball. And LeBron can eat whenever LeBron wants to eat. And then Kyrie, you figure it out from there. But you've got to get these other guys involved first. And that was coming off a game where Kyrie didn't have any assists in Utah. It was a huge deal at the time. He had like 30-something points, I think it was, and 0 assists. And Ty told him, like, it is on you to get these other guys involved. Now, Kevin was not, I don't believe, as skilled as Evan is in terms of ball handling and everything else. Kevin was really reliant on the backcourt to sort of feed him and to set him up. Whereas I think Evan can create on his own and facilitate for others at a much higher level. But the point still remains. You have to get that point driven home, I believe, to the guards, the backcourt of this is how we're going to play. We are at our best when Evan is leading it. And it will be an adjustment for everybody, but this is for the greater good. This is the best way forward for us to play. So I don't think you remove the guy to do that. I think they just have to adjust their style of play. And I think that's a lot easier than removing one of the legs of a tripod, is just adjusting the length of one of the legs.
I agree with a lot of what you said. My first and foremost thought on this is the Cavs don't need Evan to be their best offensive player. They need him to be their best overall player. Donovan can still be the leading scorer, and Evan can still take that next step forward, and the Cavs be good enough to win a championship. I want to see Evan average 22 to 23, 24 points per game next year. It's about a 6-point increase, 2 or 3 more made buckets than he did this year. It doesn't mean Donovan's scoring is going to go down to 21. Like, Donovan's still going to score his 25, 26 points a game. But you need to get Evan Mobley more involved in the offense. Early, the better, but don't go to him early and then forget about him late in the game like we saw in Game 5 against Indiana, like we saw in that first loss of the season to Boston. Get him going early and then play through him throughout the rest of the game. Evan's not just a scorer. He doesn't need to be just a scorer. I think he's an advanced passer for a big man at this stage of his career. I think he's comfortable enough with the ball in his hands to make plays as the driving force and decision maker, Jason, which he wasn't ready to do earlier in his career. I think that was one of the big areas. Kenny Atkinson and Jordan Ott deserves a ton of credit for being kind of the primary point guy on Evan's development this summer, was making him more confident in those decision-making situations. And he got significantly better. I'll go back to the postseason series against Boston last year when he was playing the 5 after Donovan got hurt in Game 5, when he had that monster performance that got us all excited about Evan for this previous season. Why do we get so excited? Because they played through him at the high post, allowed him to be the fulcrum of the offense, and everything looked good because he was spread around with 4 shooters. He was able to pick and choose his matchups. He was able to attack. He was able to pass. Evan can absolutely develop into the offensive player that Cavs need with Donovan and Darius in the backcourt. Why? Because that's the history of the NBA, has shown us that big men, and Evan is a little bit of not a traditional big man, but still a big man, can dominate when they don't bring the ball up the court. Jokic is the exception. He's not Jokic. He never will be Jokic. But he's somewhere in between Giannis and Embiid in terms of where he needs the ball to be at his best, right? Like, Giannis can take guys off the dribble from the 3-point line, not much of a shooter. Embiid likes to catch it in the high post and operate from there. He's not Giannis and he's not Embiid when Embiid's healthy. I'm not saying he's that level of player, but I'm saying stylistically speaking, it's somewhere between those two. And it goes all back to this. At the end of the day, Jason, it's on the other 4 guys on the court to get Evan the ball. If they run some sort of pick and roll action and a little switches on to Evan Mobley and a big switches on to Donovan, I don't care if it's Game 1, if it's Game 7, if it's Game 25. In the regular season, anytime a guard switches on Mobley, I want mouse in the house. Throw it down low, let him work. I'm dead serious, because the Cavs don't have to win 64 games next year. If they win 53 and make the playoffs, so be it. It's all about getting Evan and getting Donovan and getting Darius in the best position for postseason success. And what puts them in that best position is making Evan Mobley as comfortable as possible at every spot on that court to attack mismatches. Evan is the Cavs mismatch, by the way. It's not Donovan. It's not Darius. It's not Jared. It's DeAndre in certain situations. It's Evan. He's quicker than most bigs, and he's too big for most wings. Like, that is your mismatch. Use that to your advantage. If they switch, mouse in the house, feed him in the post. If you got a slow big on him, ISO, let him go. Let him work one-on-one. Let him use those moves. As someone who played Division III basketball, which is not the NBA, but you had to work on a lot of stuff in D3, and I wasn't smart enough or good enough to do it. I had 3 moves. Why? Because I wasn't confident enough to try the other 17 that I thought I could do in an actual game situation. I could do it in practice, but you put me in a game, I was going back to the 2 or 3 I know I could execute. And by the time I graduated, the scouting report was out. That's why I turned into a 3-point shooter. I couldn't get past people. The scouting report was out there. Evan has more opportunities. You got to do it in a game to get that confidence. And it comes down to Darius, and it comes down to Donovan, and it comes down to the coaches to make a concerted effort to get Evan the ball. Yes, he needs to be more assertive. It's 100%. That part of it is true. He needs to be more assertive. But everyone else has to make a concerted effort to get him the rock too, Jason. They go hand in hand.
All right. I want to take just a second here.
I said a lot. I think I just talked for 4 minutes straight. I'm sorry.
No. You're fine. I don't know where the yelling at Bull fits in, but this feels like a good spot to yell at Bull.
Perfect.
And I'm going to yell at Bull. We're recording this Tuesday. I'm going to yell at Bull Wednesday. So some of this may be redundant if you saw UCSS on Wednesday, because I'm going to yell at Bull on Wednesday.
I'm going to make you full screen here, Jason. You ready? We'll cut a short out of this. I'm going to drop my.
Well, here's the thing about, I saw a clip of Bull on the show today talking about our obsession with Evan Mobley and how it pisses him off. The thing about it is, I am not obsessed with Evan Mobley. It's just Bull keeps crapping on him and saying that he's not a good player, and I have to keep correcting him and going, no, Adam, he's actually really good. So now it has become this obsession. Adam, I'm not obsessed with Evan Mobley. I tend to think he's a pretty good player, and the numbers back that up, and the accolades he's gotten tend to back that up. But the fact that you keep killing him and trying to degrade what he is and dismissing everything that he can do forces me to then come to his defense so that I am obsessed with him. Do I think he can be the best player on the team? Yeah, I think he can be the best player on the team. As soon as next year, I think he better be the best player on the team next year, or it probably will end the same as this season ended. So they have to continue to grow him. I am not obsessed with him. I just think he's a pretty doggone good player, and you keep killing him. If you would stop killing him, I would stop defending him. Ran over. I'm not as good at it as Bull is, but I just laughed when I saw today that you and I are obsessed with Evan. I'm like, no, I'm not obsessed with him. You just keep killing him, and we have to keep correcting you.
Yeah, it's an unhealthy obsession by Bull. And I love Bull. He's lost in the soup on this one. He tried telling me Tyrese Halliburton's a better player than Evan Mobley. Halliburton's on an incredible heater. He's not a better player than Evan Mobley right now. I saw you I texted you, it's recency bias. He's not a better player.
Yeah, and we might as well segue right into, we use that, unless you have anything else to say, because that's a perfect segue into the wild.
I do have one last thing to say.
Go ahead.
On Evan Mobley, because I told this to Bull after the show, and I should have said it on air. He's 23 years old, has won Defensive Player of the Year, made an All-NBA defensive first team, and has made an All-NBA second team now. Like, he's 23 years old.
Yeah.
Like, is he a superstar? No. Is he a damn good player with an incredibly bright future? Yeah. So we'll leave it at that. I got one more read, Jason, and then we can get into some of the crazy overreactions. And our last read of the day is brought to us by Epicor, guys. Every team knows the value of hard work, of taking pride in what you build and practicing every detail to get the best results. But no one player, no matter how amazing, can do it all alone. Working together makes getting the win easier. At Epicor, the all-stars are the hardworking manufacturers and distributors who create and deliver the things we all need, from aerospace to electrical to medical devices, from small businesses with big dreams to growing enterprises with global visions. We'll equip you with the right tools to move forward, think ahead, and lead the way, because as the clock ticks down, you need to make the most out of every hardworking minute. Easier doesn't cut corners. Easier finds the lane. Discover your success at easierwithepicor.com. Jason, since the Cavs have been eliminated from the playoffs, we have seen some wild takes, some accurate, some incredibly inaccurate, about the Cleveland Cavaliers. And when we were thinking of a third topic for tonight's show, you said, let's address some of the overreactions since they've been eliminated, since it's been a month now that the Cavs have not been playing basketball. So with that, Jason, the floor is yours. Which of these wild overreactions would you like to react to first?
Well, I just think it's just the overall tone of how the Cavs are talked about locally and nationally for that matter. And we've sort of touched on it at various points in the show, but and you know the Bowl thing with just crapping all over Evan being part of it and his disdain and disgust for Darius. You know, I said earlier in the show, I think the Cavs had a phenomenal season and a horrible 2 weeks at the worst possible time to have a horrible 2 weeks. And you can blame injuries on it. You can blame not playing well in the case of Ty. There's a lot of reasons that went into it. But you know, they deserve stinging criticism for how it ended. Don't twist what I'm saying. Like, it was a disaster of a collapse. It was an awful end. And I know that they're hurt by it too. But that doesn't mean that they're a lottery team or that they should blow the whole thing up. And some of the trade proposals we've seen, most of them don't even work under the cap rules. And the ones that do don't really make them a better team. The Cavs are a really good team. And I think that's kind of been lost in all of this. Did Orlando get better? Yeah, Orlando got better. And Indiana's really good. And I probably didn't give them enough credit early on for how good they really are. But that doesn't mean that the Cavs are suddenly bad, because they're not. And it's just funny to me how the view of them has swung so wildly. And again, I'll go back to the stat that I can never remember that you always have to help me out with. I got to write it down on the palm of my hand.
Before this year, 14 teams in the history of the NBA had won 64 or more regular season games with an average margin of victory of 9 points or more. Prior to this year, 12 of those 14 teams had won the NBA title. 13 of those teams reached the finals. The one team that reached the finals and lost were the Warriors when the Cavs beat them in 16. The other team that didn't reach the finals was the Spurs that same season, who lost to the Thunder in the second round. Now, when you add OKC and Cleveland into the mix, Cleveland obviously did not reach the finals, which makes it 12 of 15 teams that didn't win the championship. And OKC, as we record right now, is one win away from making it 14 of 16 to reach the finals and 13 of 16 to win the finals.
So you can use that as you can point. I guess you can use that to point to the Cavs and say they were frauds. I actually, the more I think about it, I think it's the other way. That's an unbelievable list. That's an unbelievable list to be part of. And I think that's really an indicator of success. Now, they didn't have success. And that's why I said, like, they had a horrible time to have an awful 2 weeks, and injuries played a part of it and all that. And I think you do have to have a conversation about, are these guys mentally tough enough to play through injuries? You can have that conversation. But on the whole, they had I don't want to say they had a great season because they lost in the second round, but this is a really good team capable of really good things. And I just think that part of that has been lost in some of the discussion here over the haste to trade guys. I've written it. I'm not going to run from it. I don't know how you bring Jared Allen back. I said it the night they lost. To me, that if you got to break this up, that would be the piece where I look. But I also don't think you trade him just to trade him, just to shake things up. You don't make a trade just for the sake of making a trade. You make a trade to make the team better. And because of where they're at with the cap, it really hamstrings a lot of what they can do. And we've talked before, you got to trade Okoro and Wade just to get out of the second apron, just to make moves a little bit more tenable and feasible. And when they went into the second apron, when they made the move for DeAndre Hunter, they knew the consequences of that, and they knew where it was going to put them, and they were comfortable doing it anyway because they felt like they had a really, really good team. Now, will this one playoff loss and a really bad 2 week stretch force them to change their minds on that? There are some teams that probably would. But I don't think it's all 30 teams. I think there's other teams that would say we're gonna hold on to what we have. And I know it's not just one playoff series. I know you can go back and they haven't been able to get this far. I tend to think it's more about when you're counting on Donovan as your best player, we know now how it ends. It is a second round team. And that's not a knock on Donovan. It's not a criticism of him. He is who he is. He can't help how big he is. He can't help the load he can carry at times. He's given this team everything he's got. I'm not trying to be critical of Donovan. It's just time for somebody else to pick up the load and carry the load. And I guess that's where my obsession with Evan comes in, is I think it has to be him. As this team is presently constructed, you're not going to trade for somebody better than Donovan and Evan.
Yeah.
You're not.
They don't have the assets to anyway now.
No. So it has to come from within. You can make moves on the edges. You can make moves on the periphery, and they can have a massive impact. Look at Oklahoma City and Alex Caruso. Look at Boston and Drew Holiday and Porzingis. Like, you can make moves that have major impacts on the edges. But Alex Caruso isn't why the Thunder are where they are. It's because of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams. And Boston didn't win because of Drew Holiday. It was Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. So it's the dudes at the top that have to do it. And I just think this team has reached as far as it's going to go with Donovan pulling the sled. And that's why it has to be Evan's turn.
Yeah, I think two things can be true at the same time. It was a historically successful regular season and a historically epic playoff failure. Like, they both can be true at the same time. You don't get historically epic playoff failures without crazy expectations. And where do those expectations come from? From going 64 and whatever and having an average margin of victory of 9 points or more, which puts you in that elite category. So, yeah, the Cavs aren't a bad team. Are they perfect? No. Are they flawed? Absolutely. But they were able to overcome a lot of those flaws and win a ton of regular season games. I think part of the reason they were so successful in the regular season, Jason, was they were incredibly healthy this season. That's something you can't predict. That's something that's very, very rarely repeated. If you go injury, then you're usually healthy. Then you're usually injured again. Then you're usually healthy. And they were incredibly healthy this year. I mean, name one of their big-time key players that missed more than like a week at a time at any given point. They didn't suffer any major injuries, and they were a lot healthier than the teams they played. That's just part of the reality of going 64-16. By the way, OKC was incredibly healthy too, except for their two bigs. They were just so good, it didn't matter that Chet Holmgren played 30 games this year and Hartenstein missed about 25 to 30 as well. They were healthy. They ran into a bad matchup that is proven to be a terrible matchup for literally every team in the NBA. Indiana plays this crazy, unique style that even OKC at times has struggled against. OKC's defense was the best defense the NBA had seen compared to the average defense of the league that season since the turn of the century. And they have not been able to contain Indiana in the way we thought they would. Now, they forced a ton of turnovers, and I think part of that is Indiana's just kind of running out of gas down the stretch here. But Indiana's had success at different times in the series against this Thunder defense. In the fourth quarter of game one, they scored 60-something points in the second half. In game three, when OKC got it close and they needed a few stops in a row, Indiana scored back-to-back buckets. So they've had their stretches of success. I do think you can make the case it's a flawed roster. Some of the issues with the roster have become prevalent in not just one playoff series, but in back-to-back playoff years, and in some cases in 3 consecutive playoff appearances. And that, to me, is a bigger concern. And I'm going to do something that may never been done in the history of humanity, Jason. I'm going to give you a double tease at the same time. You ready?
I'm ready.
I'm going to tease a topic for tomorrow that, if you're watching when this airs, had already aired the day before. I don't think you can pay $20 million or more to a guy who's not an offensive initiator in the NBA today. And to me, I was on the lane of, if you find the right Allen trade, make it. He's the first piece to go. I think you actually have to trade Jared Allen. And we're going to discuss that on UCSS in more depth on Wednesday. So when you watch this on Thursday, go back and watch yesterday's clip. If you're listening to this now, which only Jason Lloyd is, you have to wait till tomorrow to hear my full thoughts. But they do have some roster flaws, and they're not nearly as flexible as I think they have to be to win a championship. But I also don't think they're on Pluto having to get to the sun. They're somewhere in like the Earth, Venus, Mars, my planets. I should have used a way better example because I don't even know where the planets are. Listen, if you're trying to get to New York City, they're not in Los Angeles. They're somewhere in Hershey, Pennsylvania area. Like, they're close enough that you can make it on a one-day drive if everything goes right. But you also would love to start that trip in Philadelphia. How's that for an example, Jason? I still don't even know that was the right example, but you get what I'm trying to say. They're a lot closer than I think the people are giving them, but they aren't there right now. And frankly, I think they could have beaten Indiana if they were fully healthy. I think OKC would have blown the doors off them in the finals. So they were close to getting through the East. I don't think they're close to the best team in the West right now.
That's interesting because OKC hasn't blown the doors off Indiana.
I think styles make fights. And you want to talk about the physicality that gave Cleveland fits, not just in that playoff series, but in the regular season. That's like fighting Abdullah Mason than fighting Mike Tyson.
I do think OKC would have beat the Cavs. You're not going to get an argument out of me on that. I think OKC would have won the championship. But I've always maintained if the Cavs were healthy, they beat Indiana. I still believe that to be true. Now, could they have gotten through New York? I don't know.
I think they would have blown the doors off New York. New York, like, it's such a sport about matchups.
Yeah. It goes back to the first topic.
They match up incredibly well against New York, and they matched up incredibly poorly against Indiana. And I know they beat OKC that one time at home in that awesome, awesome January game where, ironically, Evan and Jarrett had one of the best big man tandem games in the history of the NBA. It was the first time a pair of bigs had 20, 10, and 6 assists or more in the same game since Duncan and Robinson in 90.
Jeez.
Like, it was that good of a performance. But I don't think they could have done that 4 out of 7 times against OKC. Like, they needed a historic performance. And you know what I'm going to say? That's not even worth saying at the end. Nah, I'm just going to I'd get myself in trouble if I said one more thing. So we're going to leave it at that. Jason, any final thoughts as we wrap up this Juneteenth edition of the Ultimate Cavs Show?
No, thanks for watching. And I'm out doing yard work while you're watching this, hopefully.
Enjoy your Thursday. We are back in full force Friday, full show 11 to 1. We'll have you a recap from everything you missed over the last 2 days with Jay, Bull, who are never on the show at the same day anymore. So that should be fun. And G, it's the big 3 on UCSS. For Jason Lloyd, I'm Mikey McNuggets, and we will see y'all tomorrow. Peace.